Gentlemen, to this weekend edition, and it's wonderful to have your company once again today. It is a beautiful day, beautiful sunny day out there here in Queensland. Well, the temperature is 27 degrees, and as I mentioned before, it is sunny, and it is going to be a great weekend. And there is just so much happening right here in Brisbane. Well, of course, we know where else things are happening. New South Wales is going to be scraping the hotel quarantine. Let's take a look at that report.
New South Wales is opening up to the world in what is a major policy shift announced by the Premier today. Welcome home is the message from Dominic Perrottet, who revealed that from November 1st, just over 2 weeks from now, quarantine, a cornerstone of Australia's pandemic response, will effectively be scrapped. Now, the changes are for returning travellers and tourists who are fully vaccinated. They will no longer need to quarantine in hotels or at home. Caps on the numbers of overseas arrivals will also be removed. In other changes confirmed today, the easing of a raft of restrictions on gatherings will be brought forward to this Monday, with the state on track to hit its 80% double dose target this weekend. And the restart of regional travel for Greater Sydney residents has been pushed back to November 1st.
So there you go. That is a good news, isn't it? Yeah, we are going to be moving closer. Well, what does that mean in terms of the nation federally? Here's a message from our Prime Minister.
I'm very pleased that the New South Wales Government has advised, as you've learned today, that they'll be in a position to move to a no quarantine arrangement for people arriving back in Australia from the 1st of November, which enables us to be in a position to ensure that we can lift the caps for returning Australian citizens, residents and their families from the 1st of November into New South Wales. What this also means is that we will be allowing Australians, permanent residents and citizens and their families to leave Australia from wherever they live in Australia and return. But obviously, the capped arrangements in other states will continue because of the vaccination levels in those places and the arrangements they have in place in each of those states and territories. So this is further demonstration of Australians getting vaccinated is enabling them to do more and more and more. New South Wales is hitting 80% double dose vaccination rates. Here in this city, it is turning into one of the more vaccinated cities in the world today. And that is a great achievement for Australia, and in particular those right across Greater Sydney. And it's been hard fought and hard won. And that's why I welcome the fact that this is a further sign of the national plan coming into effect and allowing Australians to start reclaiming so many of the things that have been taken from them throughout this pandemic. I also want to note that at the National Security Committee earlier this week, where we considered these matters on Tuesday, we also agreed that we would be looking at expanding the definition of immediate family to include the parents of Australian residents and citizens.
And that would be a very sensible move as well, because parents are there as close. Well, what has the new Premier Perrottet have to say?
Regional New South Wales is in negative territory, and we believe that a lot of that concern has been in relation to the vaccination rate in regional New South Wales not quite being up where it is in Sydney. So we've decided to defer that to 1 November. I know for many people, for many Sydney-siders, and for some in the bush as well, that this will be an unpopular decision, but we're elected to make the right decisions, and I believe the decision that we've made today with our Cabinet Committee is an important one, that and ultimately the right decision. So what we will be doing as well to provide extra business support for those businesses in regional New South Wales that will be inconvenienced and put out by this change. The JobSaver payment, which we are tailing off, we will extend that for regional New South Wales at 30% of payrolls until 1 November. So for businesses across Sydney that we were still covering here in New South Wales, our 15% share of that, as the Commonwealth has moved away from that program. But for regional New South Wales, we will top that up and pay the full 30% for all businesses up until 1 November. There's another couple of changes, and important changes, and one that's quite significant that we're announcing today. Firstly, for hospitality and restaurants, we had a cap in place of 20 per booking from 1 November as well. That cap will be removed. So for hospitality catering, there will no longer be a cap from 1 November for bookings made at restaurants across the state. In addition, today, probably the most significant announcement we're making is an end to quarantine. From 1 November, those people, returning Australians, tourists who want to come back, who want to visit Australia, who want to come into Sydney, hotel quarantine will be a thing of the past. We will require which will work with the Commonwealth Government, that those people coming into Australia, whether it's a tourist or returning Australian, that you will need to do a PCR test before you board the flight, and that you will need to show proof of that you're double vaccinated. So for double vaccinated people right around the world, Sydney, New South Wales is open for business. We want people back. We're leading the nation out of this pandemic. A hotel quarantine, home quarantine is a thing of the past. We are opening Sydney and New South Wales to the world, and that date will come in on 1 November, and we'll continue to work.
So on 1st of November, that's the big day. And isn't he just a wonderful speaker, very fluent and does not muck around, very well spoken, I must say. Well done. Well, right now, what does this mean for Victorians? What would they do? Would they allow New South Wales people to come into Victoria? Let's take a look at that report.
We're also in a position to make some announcements around some major changes to the permit systems between Victoria and New South Wales, between the red and orange zone areas. As the risk profile between the two states changes, and as we get both states moving towards a more integrated reopening position, we've got further announcements to make as to how that will work. We've had our travel permit system in place since January of this year, and today we will be announcing that fully vaccinated people in New South Wales red zones will be able to enter Victoria without facing the 14-day quarantine arrangements, including people who are not Victorian residents. These changes, made on the advice of the Public Health Team and the Chief Health Officer, come as the Victorian community rapidly approaches, indeed is going to pass today, 88% of our population aged 16 and over having at least one dose, and 63% having 2 doses of the COVID-19 vaccine. Under these changes, which will come into operation from 11:59 p.m. on the 19th of October, you'll still require the Easy Vic Services permit, but what that will mean for fully vaccinated people entering Victoria from red zones will simply need a negative result from a test taken no more than 72 hours prior to their entry to Victoria. And then, once having entered to Victoria, they must isolate whilst they get another test within a further 72 hours, and once they get that negative result, go about their business. People entering from red zones who are not fully vaccinated, including those with a medical exemption, will still need that negative test before they enter the state, but they will also still be required to quarantine for the full 14 days. And they'll also have the normal testing arrangements that would apply during quarantine periods. Further changes as part of the interstate traffic light system will also apply to people coming from orange zones. People coming from orange zones will no longer be required to get tested or to isolate until they receive a negative result. No requirements will apply to them other than the need to hold a valid permit. Orange zones conditions won't change for people who are not fully vaccinated, including those with a valid medical exemption. That meaning that you will still have to get tested and you will still have to isolate until that test result comes through.
So yes, definitely good news for New South Wales there. Well, right now we've seen the Victoria and their stance on the situation. Now let's look at Canberra as Canberra emerges out of that lockdown.
Now, I know a lot of my Canberra friends have been waiting desperately for this day. What advice have you got for people in Canberra more generally as lockdown ends?
Well, look, this is an important step forward, and after 9 weeks in a lockdown that has been gradually easing through that period, today is a gentle step forward. The pandemic isn't over, but we are able, with our very high first dose vaccination rates, to take this step forward. We intend to take further steps in the coming weeks. But right now, I would just urge caution. There are a range of things that you can do today that you couldn't yesterday, and people will certainly be doing that. But do so in a safe way, and remember that there's still a quarter of our population who are not yet fully vaccinated.
It is a lot more cautious, this reopening, compared to what's just happened across the border in New South Wales. Do you worry, though, and given how interconnected Canberra is with regional New South Wales, people looking across the border and getting a bit envious about what's happening in New South Wales vis-a-vis restrictions versus Canberra?
No, not really. We've extensively researched this, and 4/5 of the population are actually more worried about New South Wales and what's going on there than they are concerned that they don't have the same level of freedoms, so to speak. So I think Canberra has approached this in a very different way. You see that in the vaccination uptake, you see that in the adherence to public health social measures, for example, and our willingness to get tested, to do the tracing and isolating and quarantining that's been necessary to protect the community. And that's why we've had significantly lower case numbers, because our measures have worked. Our vaccination rate has been higher, and we can do this safely. And I think people in the ACT are very well educated, very strong focus on public policy, understand the public health implications, but also have a view beyond 24 hours or the next 7 days. We're interested in a sustainable long-term economic recovery that's managed really well. And if you get on top of the public health situation, then your economic rebound is stronger. Consumer confidence is stronger, there's more certainty. And so I think that is the best pathway from here. It's been overwhelmingly endorsed by our community, and it's the direction that we'll be pursuing.
Speaking of the border, New South Wales Health has overnight eased restrictions regarding the border somewhat to allow more people from the ACT to travel into parts of regional New South Wales. What is your government doing on that front?
Yeah, so we have already a standing exemption for the 27 surrounding postcodes. That's basically a radius of around 100, 150 kilometres from the ACT. With this New South Wales announcement, we can look to extend that further, although it won't be extending to Greater Sydney at this time, out of respect, obviously, for the New South Wales decision to maintain that distinction between regional New South Wales and Greater Sydney. But that's going to change in time as well, and I think it can be done safely and in an enduring way in a few weeks' time, once the vaccination rates have increased further. So that's on our agenda to look at today. One of my next meetings will be discussing that New South Wales health decision overnight, and we've been working with them on a Canberra region arrangement. It's been in place throughout the lockdown. We extended it further earlier this week, and we'd look to extend it further again in the days and weeks ahead.
The vaccination.
And so that's the news coming there from Canberra, and once again, a bit cautious approach, but I think in when we look at the safety of everyone, I think it is a very responsible step in the little directions. Well, right now we know that our Prime Minister is heading to Glasgow, and here's that announcement that he's making.
I confirmed my attendance at the Glasgow Summit, which I'm looking forward to attending. It's an important event. The government will be finalising its position for me to take to that summit prior to my departure over the next fortnight. We are working through those issues with our Cabinet and with our colleagues, and I look forward to those discussions concluding over the next couple of weeks. And I simply say to everyone that net zero was an outcome that I outlined at the beginning of this year, consistent with our Paris commitments. The challenge is not about the if and the when, the challenge is about the how. And I'm very focused on the how, because the global changes that are happening in our economy as a result of the response to climate change have a real impact, and they will have a real impact here in Australia. And the plan that I'm taking forward, together with my colleagues, is about ensuring that our regions are strong, that our regions' jobs are not only protected, but they have opportunities for the future. It's not just about hitting net zero. That's an important environmental goal. But what's important is Australia's economy goes from strength to strength, and the livelihoods and the lives that Australians know, particularly in rural and regional areas, are able to go forward with hope and with confidence. And that's what my plan will be all about, and I look forward to furthering those discussions in the weeks ahead.
So there we go. That is a tough balancing act, balancing the climate change together with maintaining the economic return for the country as well. So this is the challenge that he's got, and he's taking that on head on. So, heading to Glasgow with that mandate, and of course the briefing from the whole of the Parliament. Well, right now it's time to take our commercial break and get a message from our sponsors.
Has been the longest established, trusted and respected agency in its trade area. Washa Chandra, Director of GlobeNet Realty, provides honest and ethical service to her customers. If you are thinking of investing in Brisbane real estate market, or if you are seeking professional property management, then you should contact Usha Chandra today on landline 3865 4466 or mobile 0419 775 416. And for further updates, log on to our website www.globenetralted.com.au. GlobeNet Realty is your own local real estate agency. Situated at Shop 52281 Sandgate Road, Boondall. GlobeNet Realty. Real estate is our world.
And real estate is their world. Don't forget that every Wednesday, Usha Chandra is right here in these studios discussing the real estate updates, identifying the trends, and of course, a research-based and facts and figures-based presentation on what's happening listing-wise, auction-wise, time on the market, vendor discounting, and all of that together with the new listings coming onto the market as well. So that wonderful show where we talk everything real estate with Usha Chandra is on at Brisbane, Australia time, 10 a.m. Every Wednesday. Well, right now it's time to go to India with our daily India report. And with that, let's welcome Ankita.
Welcome to the Daily India Report that brings you glimpses of the changing India and the growing engagement of the Indian diaspora with India. In our first story, over 30 countries have agreed to recognize Indian COVID-19 vaccine certificates. Over 30 countries have agreed on mutual recognition of India's COVID-19 vaccine certificates. Indian officials said the countries include the UK, France, Germany, Nepal, Belarus, Lebanon, Armenia, Ukraine, Belgium, Hungary and Serbia. South Africa, Brazil, Bangladesh, Botswana, China and some nations in Europe, including the UK, are among the countries whose travellers need to follow additional measures on arrival in India, including post-arrival testing. In the first week of October, the UK government removed the requirement of mandatory quarantine for vaccinated Indian passengers after India voiced its displeasure regarding the decision and imposed travel requirements on passengers from Britain. The Indian government claims COVID-19 vaccination coverage has achieved a 970 million milestone. India is re-elected to UN Human Rights Council for 6th term with an overwhelming majority. India is re-elected to the UN Human Rights Council for the 2022-24 term with an overwhelming majority in the United Nations General Assembly. India's permanent representative to the UN, T.S. Tirumurthy, has described the election as a robust endorsement of the country's strong roots in democracy, pluralism and fundamental rights enshrined in the Constitution. The 76th UN General Assembly held elections for 18 new members of the UN Human Rights Council who will serve for a period of 3 years starting in January 2022. India got 184 votes in the 193-member assembly, while the required majority was 97. India's current term was set to end on December 31, 2021. For election for the term 2022 to 24, there were 5 vacant seats in the Asia-Pacific states category: India, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, Qatar and the United Arab Emirates. The new members elected by secret ballot includes Argentina, Benin, Cameroon, Eritrea, Finland, Gambia, Honduras, India, Kazakhstan, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Malaysia, Montenegro, Paraguay, Qatar, Somalia, the UAE and the USA. The Human Rights Council consists of 47 member states elected directly and individually by secret ballot by the majority of the members of the General Assembly. The members of the Council shall serve for a period of 3 years and shall not be eligible for immediate re-election after 2 consecutive terms. The membership is based on equitable geographical distribution and seats are distributed among regional groups: Group of African States, Group of Asia-Pacific States, Group of Eastern European States, Group of Latin American and the Caribbean States, and Group of Western European and other states. As of January 2021, 119 of the 193 UN member states will have served as a member of the HRC. India and the US agree to reinvigorate action against terrorism financing and money laundering. After a ministerial dialogue that concluded 14th October, India and the US said they would reinvigorate action against terrorism financing, tax evasion and money laundering. This followed meeting in Washington, D.C. on economic and financial partnership led by Indian Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman and US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. A joint statement was released after the 8th US-India Economic and Financial Partnership meeting, which was also attended by Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell and Reserve Bank of India Governor Shaktikanta Das. The two nations underlined they were strengthening their cooperation in tackling money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism through increased information sharing and coordination. The meeting of the financial chiefs was the latest in a series of consultations by leaders of the two countries before and after last month's summit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Joe Biden. Ministers of Defence and Foreign Affairs of both nations have also met in recent weeks. In the joint statement, Sitharaman and Yellen stressed the importance of fighting financial crimes and the effective implementation of the Financial Action Task Force standards to, quote, protect our financial systems from abuse, end quote. The Financial Action Task Force is the Paris-based 49-member international organization that fights terrorism financing and money laundering. Among the countries that it monitors for the financing of terrorists is Pakistan, which it has placed on its grey list of nations with lax controls on or inadequate safeguards against terrorists getting funds, but the joint statement has made no mention of Islamabad. Sitharaman and Yellen said their countries looked forward to continuing to share information for tackling offshore tax evasion. They also took up the issue of tax avoidance by multinational companies, which is not necessarily illegal but results in revenue losses for some countries because others have low corporate tax levels to attract companies to situate themselves there. India and the US would work together for the early adoption of last month's agreement by the G20 grouping of major economies on taxing multinational corporations. It is seen as a significant accomplishment for updating the international tax architecture to make it more stable, fairer and fit for purpose for the 21st century. India continues to be an important player in the discussions on the future of Afghanistan. India is invited and will attend Moscow format meet on Afghanistan on October 20th. India has been invited and will attend the Moscow format meeting on Afghanistan on October 20th. This will be the first Moscow format dialogue since the takeover of Afghanistan by the Taliban in August 2021. India had its first formal contact with the Taliban in Doha on August 31st. Now at the Moscow format, it will be the first formal contact between New Delhi and the Taliban after an interim cabinet was announced in Afghanistan. India's Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson Arindam Bagchi said he could not yet confirm who would attend, but India's participation will be at the level of the Joint Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs. It is clear that India does not wish to accord any formal or even informal recognition of the Taliban government. Russia has held several rounds of talks under the Moscow format since 2017. Before the Moscow format, the extended or expanded troika of the US, Russia, China and Pakistan will have another meeting. Indian leaders have repeatedly said India's main concern is terrorism from and through Pakistan in the context of a regional security threat emanating from the Afghan situation. Recently, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has specifically stated that the government in Afghanistan is not inclusive in its present form. The Moscow format was set up on the basis of a then six-party consultation mechanism involving Russia, Afghanistan, India, Iran, China and Pakistan. India pushes Bangladesh to act on reported attacks on Durga Puja pandals in that country. India says that Bangladesh has promptly responded to reported untoward incident of attacks on Durga Puja celebrations in Bangladesh. After a disturbed India raised the urgent issue, officials said Dhaka reacted promptly to ensure control of the situation, including through the deployment of police and security agencies. India's Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson Arindam Bagchi said that the Indian High Commission in Dhaka and the consulates remain in close contact with the Bangladesh authorities and that the Durga Puja celebrations are continuing with the support of the Bangladesh agencies and the people of the country. There were reports of several instances of vandalism at Durga Puja pandals and temples across Kumla in Bangladesh by extremist mobs in the wake of a rumor circulated on social media alleging besmirching of the Quran at a puja venue. Vijay Dashmi or the Hindu festival of Dashera is celebrated with much fervour across India on 15th October 2021. The Hindu festival of Vijay Dashmi or Dashera is celebrated across India and by Hindus globally on 15th October 2021. Legend has it that it is the day that Lord Ram achieved victory over Ravan, marking the triumph of good over evil. The day also marks the culmination of Navratri and Durga Puja. Indian President, Vice President and Prime Minister greeted Indians and Indian diaspora globally. The festival is celebrated by burning effigies of Ravan at dusk when, according to the legend, Lord Ram killed Ravan using an arrow that pierced his navel. Ravan was said to be a demon king but a learned man. Dashera also marks the beginning of Lord Ram's travel back to the city of his birth and kingdom of Ayodhya. It took 20 days to return to Ayodhya with his army and wife Lady Sita. Ayodhya responds by celebrating the festival with lighting the lamps to welcome Ram after a 14-year exile. Bollywood superstar Sunny Deol returns as Tara Singh and actress Amisha Patel as Sakina in the sequel to a huge blockbuster. Anil Sharma's Gadar 2 is announced. Bollywood gave a huge blockbuster 20 years ago by the title Gadar Ek Prem Katha. Superstar Sunny Deol, son of the legendary star Dharmendra, made a huge impact with the film on the audience. Sunny was in the lead with the wonderful starlet Amisha Patel. The Anil Sharma directorial was a love story packed with action and drama. Now 20 years later, history could repeat itself. Sunny Deol, Amisha Patel and director Anil Sharma have teamed up again for the sequel titled Gadar 2. The announcement of the film came on Dashera. Fans are excited. Sunny Deol will revisit his character Tara Singh and Amisha will again play Sakina. The film will also star Utkarsh Sharma as Jeet, son of Tara and Sakina. It will be produced by Zee Studios and directed by Anil Sharma. The story will be penned by Shaktiman and music will be composed by Mithun. It is expected to go on floors soon. Sunny, Amisha, Utkarsh and others associated with Gadar 2 revealed the first look of the sequel. That's all for this bulletin of Daily India Report. Thank you for watching.
And thank you, Ankita, for that update. And yes, good to see Gadar 2 coming back. Well, right now it's time to look at some of the functions and events that will be taking place right here in Brisbane. And with that, After that, there's a small treat for everyone today as well. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all the functions and events, and it's goodbye from me from this segment until Monday. But as I promised, here's a little treat for everyone.
लटपट लटपट कमर दामिनी अधर रागिनी
So, ladies and gentlemen, there you go. I hope you enjoyed that little treat there. There's a lot of that coming up on the 24th in the this month's episode of the Music Junctions. Well, it's been wonderful having your company. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, as it is going to be a wonderful weekend with so many functions and events taking place once again right here in Brisbane. Well, until Monday, it's goodbye from me.